Imagine being the first to have the idea for a machine that will change the world forever. You work like mad, designing a device a century ahead of its time. Your dreams are big, but perhaps they're too big. You get a grant to build it, but the machine is so large and requires so much material that the grant isn't enough. A jealous and resentful colleague who tried and failed to do what you've done urges your patron not to support the project, calling it worthless. You never get the money to finish your device, but obsessed, you keep working on paper, revising and improving your design. Unfortunately, you don't live long enough to see your dream come to reality, but your work inspires generations of scientists. When they finally build something based on your ideas 109 years later, it kicks off a revolution that changes the world more than you ever thought was possible. This is the story of Charles Babbage and the analytical engine. Had he been able to complete it, the world's very first programmable computer would have been available in Victorian-era Britain. It even could have run Doom, albeit very, very slowly. Babbage's machine would have been 15 feet tall, 25 feet long, and weighed as much as a small train. But today, computers millions of times more powerful sit in your pocket, and tomorrow's computers promise to be able to do even more. Let's take a look at how we got here and where we're going. Starting early in the Industrial Revolution, there was the desire to automate long, tedious computational tasks using mechanical devices. Long before there was a concept of digital computing, the first analog computer was built in 1872 to predict the ocean's tides. It executed its calculations by using cranks and pulleys to move wheels. Babbage's more advanced dream was resurrected by famed scientist Alan Turing in 1936, when he described the idea of a universal machine, a machine that could execute any computable program. Just 1 year later, the first adding device using two-digit binary code was developed. Combined, these two innovations paved the way for modern digital computers. Early digital computers used electric switches to set mechanical relays to a state of 1 or 0, but these devices were slow. Replacing the mechanical parts for all-electric computing increased their speed dramatically. The first all-electric computers used vacuum tubes to store a 1 or 0. 1946, ENIAC, the electronic numerical integrator and computer, used 18,000 of these tubes and was the first Turing-complete universal machine. It could add or subtract 5,000 times per second. While smaller and faster than mechanical relays, vacuum tubes were still rather large and also hot, power-hungry and fragile. The next revolution in computing power came with the transistor, a basic electric switch that can be put in either an on or off state. The first working transistor was built by Bell Labs in 1947. From 1955 onwards, they replaced vacuum tubes. Early transistors were relatively difficult to manufacture and much larger than today's, but that began to change in 1959 with the silicon transistor, and mass-producible switches are considered the fundamental building block of today's digital electronics. Along with their creation came the integrated circuit, also known as a microchip, in which thousands of these transistors could be contained on a single compact chip. In the early 1960s, large room-sized computers were the way of the world. Individuals would use remote computer terminals to access a central computer, which would batch tasks given to it from multiple terminals. It could often take days between submitting a job and receiving the result. The first so-called mini-computer was released in 1964, but mini back then was still about the size of a refrigerator, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars in today's currency. Mini-computers were only used by experienced specialists at corporations, universities, and government agencies. In 1971, the microchip gave way to the microprocessor, a single chip that could take in data follow program instructions, and give out a result. The first commercial microprocessor, the Intel 4004, contained 2,300 transistors, each only 10 micrometers long and capable of executing approximately 92,000 instructions per second. These processors became widely used to control devices like microwave ovens and traffic lights. However, transistors rapidly became smaller and smaller, enabling more and more powerful devices. As far back as 1965, Intel's Gordon Moore predicted the number of transistors on a microchip would double every year. He was right, and in 1975, he updated his prediction to a doubling every 2 years. That prophecy has held true ever since, coming to be known as Moore's Law. The microprocessors of the 1970s made possible the first microcomputers, also known as the personal computer. At first, these devices were only popular with electronics enthusiasts, but the first spreadsheet application, VisiCalc, released in 1979, proved that these devices could be useful for the public at large. 1983's Apple Lisa, featuring a Motorola processor with 68,000 transistors, used all that power to be the first personal computer featuring a graphical user interface, making it much more user-friendly than the computers that had come before. The Lisa's applications allowed users to create digital art and write documents. The modern PC we all grew up on is, in a sense, merely a more advanced version of what started with the Lisa. But today's PCs are radically more powerful. The rise of the Internet allowed access to powerful processing run remotely on servers, similar to the terminals of the 1960s computers. Meanwhile, in the early 21st century, microprocessors began to include multiple cores which could process instructions in parallel, making them much faster. And while Intel's first microprocessor had 10 micrometer-long transistors, today's transistors are often as small as 3 nanometers. Apple's M3 Max processor features 92 billion of them. All this power has taken us from simple, low-resolution graphics to hyper-realistic 3D worlds. It allows us to render virtual reality, stream 4K video, and have little care for how many tabs we leave open in a browser window. Perhaps most miraculously, you can like this video and subscribe to Beyond Now. Today, even the microcomputer is often considered too large. As the size of transistors has shrunk, we can now fit yesterday's supercomputers into our phones. Modern mobile phone processors are hundreds of thousands of times more powerful than the ENIAC was, all while only using a few watts of power. Endless entertainment and the combined knowledge of all of humanity are now at your fingertips wherever you go. As we move into the future, Moore's Law is expected to end. Transistors will reach the limit of how small they can be made at atomic sizes. Gordon Moore himself predicts that Moore's Law could end as soon as 2025. But shrinking transistors isn't the only way computers can be made more powerful, and scientists are moving full speed ahead with radical ideas that could change the very nature of computers. The possibility of switching from silicon to biological computers is being studied. These biological computers, also called wetware, would use DNA, proteins, or neurons to process instructions. Such computers could theoretically solve complex mathematical problems while using far less energy than electronic computers, and perform more reliable calculations by processing data simultaneously rather than sequentially. A neuron, for example, could direct electrical pulses through over 200,000 channels in any synaptic connection, far greater than the binary limitation of today's transistors. However, such technology is very far away, although proof-of-concept experiments have been successfully conducted, including using leech neurons to process basic addition. A little closer to prime time are quantum computers. Similar to neurons, quantum computers have the potential to increase computing power by moving away from binary. Quantum computing uses qubits, bits that are neither 1 nor 0, but in a superposition between the two. We like to think we're pretty smart here at Beyond Now, but we're not smart enough to understand how the hell that's supposed to work. Nonetheless, companies such as Google and IBM have successfully built basic prototype quantum computers. These computers require supercooled fluids so the computer can operate at near absolute zero temperatures and use rare materials such as helium-3, a nuclear research byproduct. If, however, quantum computers can develop further, these machines will have the ability to produce information that classic computers cannot easily produce. It's expected this technology could lead to major advances in artificial intelligence, drastically expedite pharmaceutical discovery, and power advances in engineering, global shipping, and financial modeling. The possibilities for computing's future are immense. The future is not just about smaller transistors and faster processors. It's about reimagining the very essence of computing and unlocking an era of innovation that will benefit humanity in ways we can only begin to fathom. Just like Charles Babbage almost 200 years ago. How have the advances in computing in your lifetime changed your life? What do you want the future's computers to be able to do that today's aren't yet capable of? Join the conversation and predict the future with us down in the comments. At Beyond Now, we seek to help humanity learn from our past and prepare for our future by studying the subjects that can allow our species to advance. In addition to liking, commenting, and subscribing, we hope you'll also consider supporting Beyond Now by becoming a patron and part of our community of learners and thinkers.